This is the first part of the portals exploration with Dr. Julie Krull. We developed such an expensive and far-ranging and traversing conversation across huge spaces, and therefore we wanted to chunk the conversation into two parts. This first part is the one where we explore the development, the evolution of the Dr. Julie show, All Things Connected. And we integrate inside that part the exploration of the 5 successive waves of the transformation age, the new age, the transformation age, and what can we therefore sense and intuit about the new phase that we are exploring at this time into the decade of the 2020. And we will come back in the second part and explore more deeply the journey of fractured grace. Imagine this. What would it be like to live so fully and completely in a flow state that the unified field is our default, our preferred and normal playground? This is the invitation our guest, Dr. Julie Krull, makes in her book, Fractured Grace. Julie asks, is it possible to resolve the limitations and conflict of our dualistic nature and ignite an awakening that would evolve consciousness and create a new paradigm of our wholeness? Dr. Julie is a teacher, founding steward of the Good of the Whole, radio talk show host of the Dr. Julie Show, All Things Connected, and author of Fractured Grace, How to Create Beauty, Peace and Healing for Yourself and the World. Julie invites us to embody our highest creative potential and shift from the egocentric separation fantasy. Let me say this one again. Shift from the egocentric separation fantasy to a healthier, soul-centric flow of resonance and coherence. She's a mentor for leaders and influencers working toward whole systems change. Julie, thank you for joining us on this Portals Discovery conversation.
Thank you, Aviv. It's an honor to be here and a delight I've been looking forward to.
So you often begin your conversations on the Dr. Julie Show, All Things Connected, by asking people what All Things Connected means for them. So I'm going to begin by asking you, what is the portal you're in at this time, and where do you find joy inside it?
What a beautiful question. I thought you were going to ask me, what does All Things Connected mean to you? What portal? You know, I've been in this liminal space the last 12 months, beginning in 2021, from a space of COVID and 12 days of fever. I went into this different relationship with time-space that was different than the flow state, and it was different from the mystical state. It was more of this embodied sense of nothingness and timelessness and spacelessness. So I've been in this portal playing for a good 12 months. The last couple months, time-space has come back in and tried to create structure and deadlines and projects and things moving forward, which has been really interesting. But the portal now of this really liminal space of pure potentiality has been really fun and creative and ripe and also, instead of it being this space of creating as you take a step forward in real time, it's been now as if the steps are forming themselves ahead of me in this portal now. It's like, it's okay, just trust. And so I've moved from the liminal, there's nothing there, take the step and trust, to this really deep space of trusting and knowing I could even close my eyes or be blindfolded, and those steps are appearing before me now, not as I step, but they're there, which is exciting and a little less scary, and really a beautiful space of even so, as those steps appear before, it's like used to be intuition, you'd tune in and intuitively things would pop up, but now it's a more state of that constant is already there, and it's just this more embodied guidance rather than me looking for guidance or asking for guidance or tuning into that unified field. It's now more of an embodied sense that is really it's fun. It's yeah, when you notice it, it's really fun.
And liminal is another word for portal, and the way you describe this feels to me has about it the sense not so much of walking blind, but rather walking backward. So you see what appears in front of your eyes because you're walking into a space that's unfolding and revealing itself in front of you as you enter that space. That's the sense of walking backward. And you also highlight in there a sense that it's not somewhere else. It's right here, right now. You're part of whatever it is, the process as it manifests with guidance, intelligence, and discovery.
Yeah. It really is more of that within piece too, which is really, that embodied sense is a different relationship with the whole, with that unified field. It's nice.
So there are many aspects of fractured grace that I read that I want to visit, and your journey in it and the way you tell the journey. But I'd like us to actually start with your show, the Dr. Julie show, and where you have engaged in conversation with many leading thinkers over the last decade or so. What was, especially in the transformational space, what is the story of the show? How was it birthed?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Thank you. And there's a funny birthing story about it, and then there's the process. I'll share both because I think they're really interesting. Because 9 years ago now, probably 10 years ago, right now, I was ignoring the universe and signs. So I'm working away, and all of a sudden I'm just getting all these emails coming in saying, we want you to be a radio host, be your own talk show host, and I'm getting these emails, and I'm just like throwing them in the trash, not thinking about having a radio show. It wasn't in my awareness. I thought there would be media and in the future, and I knew I would be speaking, but I never thought I'll have a radio show. So literally, Aviv, I was ignoring and throwing in the trash. And one day I went into the office, and on the answering machine, back in the day when we had landline phones and answering machines, did we have a cell phone then? I don't even remember. But I go into the office, and there's a message on my machine. And it was from a director that was doing a pilot show for the Oprah Winfrey Network. And they wanted me to be the guest expert that would follow them along on all of these episodes. And it was like so bizarre and startling. Like, what? Like, number one, Oprah Winfrey Network? Are you kidding me? Like, what is this? And here I am in the middle of Nebraska. I don't think it says that on my website anywhere, but they found me in the middle of Nebraska. And all of a sudden it was like, listen to these media invites. So I followed that thread and followed up with it and had some meetings. And at the same time, this radio invitation came in again. And I listened and I trusted. And so there was the beginnings of the Dr. Julie Show, All Things Connected. Now, the fun journey part, the evolution of it, has been fascinating because in the beginning, I was inviting these guest experts to come on and talk about unitive consciousness and all things connected. And it was as if we had to prove this to the listeners. That's how it was inside of me. Like, let's help the audience really understand that all things are connected. And I would ask that question. And that question was if we were trying to prove it to the audience. And all of a sudden, the shift, and I'd have to go back and really feel into that. It'll be interesting for you to talk about your timeline when you might have sensed that. But one day, it just occurred to me, we're not proving this anymore. Everyone was coming on and going, of course, because it is. What does all things connected mean to you? Well, it's just the nature of reality. It's just that, and we weren't bringing science in. We weren't having to prove things anymore. It was just like, of course, all things are interdependent, interconnected. We have this unified field of consciousness, and life emerges and materializes from this new understanding of information at the center of our universe. And so once we got to that place, it was exciting, and the guests started changing, the conversations began to change, and it's just been a fun journey.
So you are exploring with your guests these themes of interconnection and creativity and consciousness and what is emerging at the convergence point of health and science and spirituality without needing to then prove it anymore. And what are some of the key learnings that you are unfolding along the journey with your guests over this decade?
Well, I think that the most important piece is that we do now have science, every branch of science, and looking at cosmology, evolution biology, consciousness studies, developmental psychology. It's like all of them converge with the same story from all the different disciplines now. And really showing how this false belief in separation created the world as we know it, that's literally breaking down. So the exciting thing is this breadth and depth of scientific wisdom that's now there in all of these different disciplines, so that we can create this unitive narrative that it's time to really begin to rethink and reimagine everything. Our world as we know it was built in this consciousness of separation, and it simply isn't true. We're not separate from one another. We're not separate from the planet. We're not separate from all the inhabitants of the planet, but we're not separate from this creative designing intelligence of the universe. We're an expression of it. We're an expression of this impulse of evolution. And now we don't have to argue that fact. We just have to figure out how to talk about it. We need to really help different levels of consciousness, because what we do know is that there's this developmental stage of consciousness, and we have humans. Humanity is in all of those stages right now, you know? And so we have the babies growing up, and we have the, you know, the more advanced levels of consciousness that understand that unitive thing in an embodied state. So from that wide range of who we are as a species, without judging or blaming or shaming anyone, how do we hold this wholeness, this unified, connected, whole reality, and hold it from this broader perspective and the underpinnings of it, so that everyone can really begin to feel it, experience it, and embody it in a new way of waking to it. You know, we've spent a lot of time and energy trying to wake people up because of the urgency of our times, where people are saying, you know, hurry up, we got to make change. But when we really truly understand this, there's really no urgency. There's the imperative to hold it and hold it all and hold that higher vibrational frequency, and allow everyone in there to attune to that higher level of frequency, that the higher understanding of our universe.
And there is probably a place where we don't even need to hold it anymore, because it holds itself and we get liberated inside it. And still, where you started this is so critical, because you are asking us to consider, what if that dominant worldview of separation is what keeps us trapped inside this belief structure that doesn't sustain life? And when I thought about this, really most people, or many people at least, they don't even know that they are trapped in what you describe as a separation fallacy or a separation fantasy. They suffer the consequences of it, but they don't even know that they are in that paradigm. How do you tell the story of that alchemical transformation that begins to emerge when we release this paradigm of separation that you've been conversing about for the last decade?
Ooh, it's a question I asked myself when I was just a small child even, and continue to ask that. It's the question that really wakes me up in the morning and fuels all my creative projects, is how do we deliver that? How can we create the conditions to help people understand where they are? And right now I see two paths and two pathways that I've been working on and really expressing from, because we have the spiritual pathway. We have that direct experience, the gnosis, you know, the Gnostic in us that has a knowing, that has a direct experience of unity, of God, of the divine, of the sacred, of the wholeness. And that direct experience is one powerful pathway, but we can't make it happen. We can create the conditions for that, but most people that have never had that experience don't know that they even create the conditions for that. And then we have this pathway of science that's so important, that I just got excited about. That, yeah, science is now showing us that we're a part of this universe that is so, I'm going to say divinely creative, which brings the science and the spirituality back together, but is so whole and unitive that we can't separate it. So the thinkers that want that knowing can go down that pathway of science and start looking at the new science and the spiritual experiences there. So here we have these two. And yet, what you just asked me is, we still have those that are in that level of consciousness without a need to explore it at all. And we have those, a lot of empirical science is still in a very tribal consciousness of separation. Like it's, you know, that spiritual stuff is just woo woo, and it doesn't belong in science, and that science isn't real, or, this is what we believe in Newtonian physics, and they're still in that place. So it is a conundrum. It's a conundrum. How do we create that for those? And what I'm sensing into is the arts and tapping into that creative and beautiful, that the beauty of it and the creativity, and how do we use all of the arts through voice, through drama, through the visual arts, through dance, through, we have so many different memes that are going out in the world, and using technology. How do we connect the arts with technology to let that go out? How do we create the direct experience so you're in a theater and you feel it? When we feel it, we can't deny it. And even the world's greatest thinkers that are stuck in their head have been able to have those kinds of experiences and really feel it. And it's shifted their reality. So I'm playing with the arts now. How do we do this? How do we create that direct experience? And also using the breath and practice. We've had a real beautiful time on our planet, moving from the Eastern traditions to the West here, practicing yoga and meditation and body work like that. And now we have the science with Heart Math Institute teaching us how to come into that heart space and create greater coherence between the head and the heart. And when the mind, heart are in the brain and the heart are in coherence, creates a greater coherent field. And when you and I are in coherence together, we create an even more beautiful coherent field between us, among us. And so, again, more ways of science bringing into the spirituality, and this heart coherence is an incredible gift to humanity right now, because it's easy to teach, it's easy to experience, and it brings us into that no thingness that I mentioned. It brings us into that no time, space, place, and we can really feel something when we go into that heart resonance space together.
So the separation fallacy, we could trace this story in all sorts of ways back to even ancient times, but certainly to the 1600 and to Descartes and to the primacy of doubt and the separation of religion and the scientific method. And you see through this really 4 or 5 centuries, time and again, reappearance of various streams that are seeking to reintroduce integration. And then we come to the middle of the 20th century. And here is how, at a very high level, how I'm telling the 5 waves of the last 60 years. And I'm curious to put this in front of you and for you to say, well, what would you add, what would you change, and where do you see it through the lens of your conversations with your guests. So I would describe Transformation 1.0, you can call it the rise of the New Age, right there at the 60s with the rise of postmodernity, breaking from traditional paradigms and structures. And I'm going to use the word differently to the way you use the word tribal. I'd call this Transformation 1.0 is tribal in nature. It's the hippies, it's the early famous gurus, it's transcendental meditation coming to the West with the Maharishi, it's the Beatles time, it's East meeting West, Tea group, and some of the earlier communal, relational, that iteration is showing up, and the human potential movement is coined, Ram Dass, the rise of SLN and Finhorn. That's wave 1. And it leads to what I term as Transformation 2.0, late 70s, early 80s, the institutional phase, or beginning to get institutionalized in some places, where we have people diving deeper into Eastern and Western teachings and how to integrate these, and we have intensified group work, and we have the rise of new intentional communities, the Omega Institute, and some of the early embrace of new developmental models, developmental framework teachers are bringing right there into the 80s. And we also have at this stage the first wave of trying to integrate the scientific narrative into those spiritual frameworks. And then I describe the transformation 3.0, the enterprise wave. The enterprise wave into the 90s, really all the way through perhaps to the dot-com bust and 9/11, the rise of Burning Man, Silicon Valley integrating with certain aspects of the New Age, the beginning of the mindfulness movement, and then we have the capitalist impulse and commercialism capturing the transformation impulse, and the rise of the New Age enterprise with some luminary teachers and a business model around them. Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, Caroline Myss, Oprah for sure as really the evangelizer of many of these people, Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Marianne Williamson, Tony Robbins, and I don't know that they will all appreciate me calling all their names in one list, but that's all right. I'm simply observing that you have those people operating in that same time, and you also have the first and second wave of major disillusionments. People seeing that this is not really working, that it gets arrested around the guru trap, and so on. And then you have the 4.0, which is the transition, and Ken Wilber appears in the 90s, but also is a prime character in what I call the distributed internet wave, the first decade of the 21st century, the Wild West. You have in the idealistic distributed phase of the internet with a run-up to the 08-09 crisis. And where we get the distributed phase, we also get the Yes We Can Obama meme and that generation, the Occupy movement, the Tea Party in the background, and the leaderless movement of change and transformation in the desert of the early phase of the second decade of the 21st century, which is where you come into working with your show. So that's why I'm putting this background. And I think the fifth wave, the transformation 5.0, which I will describe as the beginning of a whole new integration, is the run-up to the 2020s. So coming through the social media phase, the rise and fall of the IDW, the polarization capture, the Jordan Peterson phenomenon, the Sam Harris, and the integration now inside of all that of truly seeing, as you started to describe, science and evolutionary biology and the environment and the planet and spirituality. All of that is arising with the background of the meta-modern movement, Game B, the liminal web, now the post-doom spirituality. But I'm saying all of that is a background to what you are accessing as the essential wholeness that we can tap into as an authentic, embodied, emergent possibility at this time. What would you change, add, restate? I've never tried to map it in this way in any conversation before, so this is kind of how I thought into it this morning before our call. How would you restate or add to any of that?
I love how you've put it in this framework. Thank you. Genius. And I'll just make some observations. What was coming to me was this this new age and the integrative model. It's like the integrating was still integrating parts. And I had a important talk yesterday, and we talked about shifting this from the old mind, body, spirit wholeness, and that integration. Integration is still, we're still missing the point. We're still in that model. So maybe we'll see where the next one is, and I can help you even frame the next one, because I do feel like we're moving into the next one. So prior to the pandemic, we were talking about wholeness from a narrative of separation. We're talking about wholeness through a lens of separation. So many people weren't in the embodiment of wholeness and unity. They were getting it and still coming from a place of separation. So now imagine, this is where I think we're going. We're not there yet, Aviv, and I hope we get there really soon. But now imagine our definition of wholeness isn't mind, body, spirit anymore. It really is understanding that we are nested within whole living systems, within a whole living system. So that our wholeness is, what would be the right word? There's an imperative that we understand our wholeness in relation to a greater whole. So that if the whole planet isn't healthy, I can't be healthy. And so my health depends on living for the good of the whole. So my wholeness is so interrelated. It's inseparable to the health of the water, the health of the air, the health of the soil, vitalizing food, relationships with others, all culture, right? It's like the health and healing of the whole system includes this local whole, but it includes a cultural whole, healing our culture. It includes the planet and that as whole systems health. We can't leave anything out anymore. So we're moving from this integrative space of seeing ourselves, oh, mind, body, spirit, cool, I'll do yoga and meditate. And now we're into this responsibility of caring for the whole and cooperating with others. In evolution biology, I love this phrase, this one sentence. Elizabeth Sahtouris, an evolution biologist, says that as every species on the planet that's moved from late adolescence to early adulthood went from this fierce, competitive, over-consuming species that ran out of resources and took this leap into cooperative communities that care for all life. And I add future generations, because when we study superorganisms on the planet, it's not just all life now, it really is future generations. So we're moving from a species of late adolescence into early adulthood. And our imperative is to create cooperative communities that care for all life and future generations. It's living for the good of the whole. And it's just a part of who we are. It's an innate capacity that we have that we need to turn on and really understand it and live it into being.
So there is a sensed distinction you're making there, because what you're describing is that we're leaning, sensing, opening, discovering this more fully integrated throughout way of being and becoming. And we are sensing it and we are not quite there. So this entire conversation is going to be us coming into that, because it's a couple of years since you wrote Fractured Grace, and I want to still retrace some of the journey towards it. For example, here is something you say, you write in Fractured Grace, you say, we're heading toward complete transformation, but fail to see our direct responsibility and opportunity to consciously evolve, which is what you just spoke to. It is time to face our acute symptoms of brokenness, of the weight of humanity's shadow, and of the illusion that keeps us paralyzed in fear and separation. It's time to name our dysfunction and the endemic disease of a runaway ego, which creates separation consciousness and weakens our resolve, threatening our existence. It's time to diagnose the madness of individualistic, self-serving agendas and actions that are destroying us as individuals, families, nations, as a species, and as a planet. And perhaps what you just offered now was, in a way, re-editing this to say, well, it's madness, but that's how we behaved in our teenage years as a species. We are now called to evolve into the mature version of ourselves. What would you say now to how the sense of moving towards healing and wholeness and this maturation that you're sensing?
You know, I think that whole conversation about our awareness is still really important, because those who are in that place of separation don't know they're in separation. However, we have these three evolutionary drivers right before us. You know, 2020 brought this pandemic, which is this incredible evolutionary driver that's awakened people, whatever the correct word is there. And then we have this evolutionary driver of our technology. And you had already mentioned social media. It's like technology has connected us everywhere. So our technology is showing us that interconnectivity again, and it's an evolutionary driver. And then we have this evolution of consciousness. You know, we are waking as a planet, we're waking as a species. There are those that have woke to early adulthood, like who really have experienced that. So here we be. And I think that it's an imperative for us to walk backwards, like you said. Like, start walking backwards and watching it as we're moving toward the next decade of this reimagining and rethinking. Because I think I'm getting really off on another tangent, but I'm going to go with it here because this is popping in. But when you ask that question, it's like, this is whole systems transformation. This is also transmutation. So it's not like a step from here to here and we make these incremental steps and we change. Literally, things are radically changing and changing fast. And perhaps, like Elizabeth Satora says, perhaps even from this DNA of these bodies, that literally things are going to change radically. So how do we build cooperative communities that care for all life? It really is a whole new way of being, which asks us, why do we educate our kids the way we do? How could we do that better? Why do we exchange in commerce the way we do? How can we do that better? Why do we heal our bodies the way we do? How can we do that better? I mean, this is whole systems transformation and healing. And so you hold transformation and healing up at the same time. And it's like, okay, healing means to make whole again, but we're not going back to something. And that's been one of the illusions that even evolutionaries are talking about. It's like, oh, we've got to go back to wholeness. We got to go back to this unity. It's like, we're not going back. We literally are healing and transforming, going forward to something brand new. And
one of the powerful messages early in your book is the the AIP message, the anything is possible message. And I sense that that's to do with that. It is curious. Last year in a number of events that I led, this appeared, the idea that anything and everything is possible. How do you mean and experience inside this dramatic transformation with these drivers that you are describing? How do you experience the sense of anything is possible and the invitation that it makes?
Well, this is a really important piece because anything is possible also means the worst case scenarios are possible, right? Thinking about artificial intelligence, I spoke with a large group yesterday, and they are a multinational tech company that totally works in artificial intelligence to pulse the planet to see what's going on. And so here we have the tech community saying, well, let's, put in chips, let's da 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 da. It's like we have so many innate capacities that don't need the technology. We don't need a chip implanted somewhere in here to do some of the things they're saying.
We already have it.
We already have it. We already have it. It's an innate capacity. And in some hasn't turned on yet. And we have evolutionary capacities that are just now coming on board. Some of the most exciting things we do when we think anything is possible is when we put ourselves in connection with others in those cooperative communities, and we learn how to harvest collective intelligence and how to harness the designing intelligence of the universe in co-creation together. Literally, amazing things happen. Those are new evolutionary capacities that we didn't even knew existed before. So we were on this individual solo journey as an individual walking on the planet for millennia. And now, as we're moving into this imperative, we're turning on more of those innate capacities, but we're also initiating new evolutionary capacities. I say the sky's not the limit anymore. The cosmos is the limit. When we begin saying what is possible, literally, we need to think bigger than we've ever thought before. And so much of where we're at on the planet is about creating greater coherence among communities and holding, and I'm saying holding, you're right, we don't have to hold it anymore. But as I create greater coherence and we create coherence together, we enter that miracle zone so much more frequently and stay there. So what we can imagine is only the beginning, because we can't even imagine everything that's coming. Think about it like this too. I think about it like this. The last 50 years has been incredible. I mean, you could put some of that technology in your mapping that you just did, and we'd go, I said on this call, did I even have a cell phone back then? I don't remember. I had a landline and an answer machine, but I don't remember even if I had a cell phone there. But it wasn't that long ago we didn't have these mobile devices with us. The last 50 years, things have changed so much. Imagine even if it was 10 times that amount of change in the next 50 years. I think it's going to be way more than that. The next 50 years are going to blow us away. So even go back to the last year and this next year, that change, that radical systemic change, and technology and culturally, and I mean, all of that is in process, and our small minds can't even imagine.
You are inviting us to recognize that we've got to transcend the habituated or habitual mind and literally, truly go, as you said, beyond the sky's the limit, embrace the universe at large, the cosmos at large, which we have to, because the kind of complex, wicked problems that we are facing as humanity, we're not going to be able to solve within the paradigm that we applied through to this point. And it's curious because in many ways we are already a new species, but we haven't really caught up to ourselves and to our own evolution. And part of the reason why we need to be in a conversation like this is to map and unfold and discover what it is that is actually going on, because as you say, there is the collective participative intelligence that we unlock in the dialogue, and then there is how that becomes an active vessel or a womb with which there is a designing intelligence that can reveal itself. And through the process, it's not just that we just describe something that happens elsewhere, as you started describing. It's happening right here, right now, inside us. So we are co-evolving, co-creating, co-enabling that process as it emerges through us.
Yeah. Those two words, co-evolving and co-creating, are so important for us. Barbara Marx Hubbard and Carolyn Anderson and Catherine Roski. Carolyn and Catherine wrote a book called The Co-Creator's Handbook. And Barbara Marx Hubbard was a mentor of theirs. And they've defined, I'm going to kind of put both of their definitions together, but I think it's so often we hear co-create and we think cooperate, collaborate. But literally what it's saying is, as I connect in with this designing intelligence of the universe and come together with others in that same space, aligned with that designing intelligence of the universe, that's where the universe comes in and co-creates through us. And it's a whole different way of saying and really feeling, experiencing co-creation, that this isn't just a collaboration or a cooperation and we're coming in to get our collective intelligence. It's really bringing in a higher level of sourced intelligence amidst us, among us, within us.
So let's talk about fractured grace.